Well, welcome everyone. Good morning. Welcome to creating a cybersecurity competition for small business in your community. My name is Teresa DeGroat. I am the Director of Membership for ISSA Denver. And this is the 5th virtual event that we have put on in the past few weeks. And basically what happened is the Rocky Mountain Information Security Conference was canceled. And so we took all the content that you would have gotten at that conference and we're making it available twice a week, virtual events like this. And so be sure to visit the events page and look at what's coming up and sign up. You earn CPE credits for each event that you attend. So I'm going to get this going by introducing our speaker today, Laura Baker. And Laura believes that cybersecurity scare tactics are ineffective and paralyzing to small business owners. Thus, she co-founded CyberWyoming and the economic development program Made Safe in Wyoming with her partners Patrick Wolfenbarger and James Deaver to take a fresh approach and emphasize business owner strengths and capitalize on them. This approach creates a supportive environment to encourage adoption of cybersecurity best practices in one of the most underserved demographics of business. With social service, county agency, mental health, healthcare, IT, and nonprofit experience, Laura created CyberWyoming, truly understanding business owner technological needs. She most often uses her risk management background to translate technical speak to business risks, but also pulls from the psychology of language and decision making. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Laura. Take it away.
Teresa. Thank you, Teresa. It's so nice to be invited today, and I thank you all for attending. I'm really pleased today to talk to you about creating a cybersecurity competition for businesses, nonprofits, small municipalities that might be in your community. But first, let me talk a little bit about CyberWyoming. We're a 501c6 nonprofit. We don't sell hardware, software, or technology implementation services. And we just recently received our 501c3 status for the CyberWyoming Alliance, which is our education and outreach arm. We also have an apprenticeship program because we believe that workforce development, we all know that there's IT shortages in the nation, in Denver, in Wyoming, it's everywhere. And so we actually have an IT specialist apprenticeship program as well as a cybersecurity technician apprenticeship program that we created and developed. And I believe that there's one that's starting in Colorado soon too. Wyoming was the first in the region for that. The program that I really wanted to talk to you about today is the one that created the competition, or I guess the competition was an offshoot of it, and that's the Made Safe in Wyoming program. And we'll focus mostly on the competition, but we have to talk a little bit about why the Made Safe in Wyoming program occurred in order to understand why the competition came about. And then we just have a lot of organizations in Wyoming that support this competition. And so all of these logos, we couldn't do the competition without them. The competition is free to any Wyoming business. And the reason it's free is because of these logos that you see on your screen. And so let's talk about the Made Safe in Wyoming program and the competition now. So like I said, the competition sprung from the Made Safe in Wyoming program. It's an economic development program that's administered by CyberWyoming. And here's a good story about why we created the Made Safe in Wyoming program. As IT professionals, many of us have seen this culture clash between business leaders and IT, because IT is often seen as a necessary expense, right? In fact, I found one book that said that business owners would prefer to ask the 19-year-old kid in their neighbor's basement for IT advice than they would an IT professional. And this would rarely happen in another skilled profession. So I think that's really interesting. But then when I mentioned this study to our previous governor, Governor Matt Mead, at a conference, he said, well, why do you think that is? And I just kind of said, well, do you like talking to your IT guy that comes to fix your computer? And he started laughing. And so I think that this culture gap between tech professionals, we specialize, and business leaders, they specialize, that there's this gap between us that we have to address. And so this competition and this program came because of this gap. So we have to change the mindset on both sides, right? And so the Made Safe and Wyoming program redefines the cyber team. And all of these boxes that you see on this slide are the cyber team. So for instance, many of us have heard about accounts payable scams in IT. Well, part of the cybersecurity team should be the accountant to tighten up those accounts payable processes in the small business, right? Or the nonprofit. And so that will so we have to bring the entire team in and redefine that entire team in order to truly meet cybersecurity standards. This program also gives the business owners the confidence to manage this entire team. Now, they already are managing many members of it. So by saying, look, I already know how to manage 5 out of all of these, I can manage IT, and in addition to it, it gives them that boost of confidence right there. And so we teach, just to give them that extra boost and hand-holding, we actually teach the business owner technology as a second language through this process. We go through a NIST-based homegrown checklist that those logos that I just showed you, all of our members helped us put together, and they review it twice a year. And then we basically call ourselves the social workers of cybersecurity. So we are cybersecurity business counselors in this competition process. And so the offshoot of this whole Made Safe and Wyoming process is the competition. And like I said, it's free because of our membership and our sponsors. And why did we decide to do a competition? Because, well, competitions are fun. You see these all the time right there to encourage people to increase their skills. That's what a competition does. But when you look at the competitions that are out there, you have Capture the Flag that are mostly for students and professionals. You might see something at DEF CON about that, right? And then the second one, that I've heard about is the Air Force competition for the youth cyber defense and the Cyber Patriot program. You see the National Collegiate Cyber Defense competition as well, and that's again for college students. And then you see a lot of hackathons for pen testers, programmers, that kind of stuff. But I want to ask you about these competitions. Where does the person who owns 3 furniture stores fit in? I mean, we need them to meet the same goals to increase their skills, right, for their cybersecurity risk management. So there's this large group of people out there who need cybersecurity defenses, but they're missing from this fun activity. And these are the people that keep our economy strong. And they're also the people that are hurting right now with COVID. So this is a great time to do this competition because they may be trying part of the Paycheck Protection Act and trying to keep some of their employees busy. This is a great time to address cyber risks because they have a little bit of extra time because their business is slower. So there's an adoption issue when it comes to cybersecurity, and I think many IT professionals have actually experienced this. Small businesses truly aren't adopting cybersecurity defenses at the rate that larger businesses are. And if you look at the Ponemon Institute study recently, it's only between 2017 and 2019, it's only gone up about 9% for small businesses that rate their company's cybersecurity efforts as highly effective. So that's kind of disturbing to me because it went from basically 1 in 5 to almost 1 in 3. In 2017, only 1 in 5 were adopting cybersecurity frameworks like PCI DSS or NIST or anything like that, ISO, whatever. They only 1 in 5. Now, hopefully that's gone up. The Ponemon Institute in 2017 didn't measure the same, so I don't know. And then the budget allocation for small to medium-sized businesses is much lower than the budget allocation for cybersecurity risk management efforts with larger companies. So this is an underserved population of our business community and our community in general. But many of us as tech professionals know that there's still a prime target. And we've seen these statistics in many different places in the last couple of years, but this was a good one that I wanted to throw up. But here's the thing. A lot of people don't take the psychology aspect into account in our profession in IT. And there are psychological distortions that hurt the adoption of cybersecurity best practices. And I've translated these to normal speak instead of psychological speak. But basically, I think many of us have heard this when we've been on site at small businesses. Oh, it's not going to happen to me. I'm too small, right? We've heard that a lot. Or I have this other stuff I need to spend my budget on. I can't spend it on, upgrading my whatever. And a lot of them also kind of have this discounting of, well, my personal data is already out there, so my customers are too. So why should I have to protect it further? I mean, they aren't familiar with the legal climate. Quite often they're uncomfortable with technology and they don't understand or trust technology experts, which, is evidenced by some of the other studies that I read about. They'd rather ask their 19-year-old neighbor's kid in the basement. But the risk is really great, and they do know that. They do know that the risk is great. And the vulnerable in all of our economic communities are the smaller organizations that can't afford a full-time IT professional. Yet those vulnerable have the most potential for economic growth in our communities, right? They're just starting small. So this is why we created this competition, to attempt to address the psychological aspects and these psychological distortions that we just talked about. I trust my peers, but not outside cybersecurity experts. Because people on the outside of the technology industry can act skeptical, right? So basically, this competition takes the first year's brave participants and encourages them to the next year to become mentors. And then it grows. And cybersecurity adoption efforts within that community grow and grow and grow and have the potential to grow exponentially. Because after all, the competition is about adoption for cybersecurity, not necessarily against other business owners, right? It's really about them being able to sleep at night, understand the risks, and know how to manage them with that giant team that we talked about in the Made Safe in Wyoming program. The goal is beating the hackers, not each other. So the flavor of the competition is truly that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a birthplace for innovation, creativity, and change. And the competition fosters this. So the goals of the competition are basically to increase the adoption of cybersecurity best practice. This strengthens our local economies, right? That's why we're doing it. To reward the business owner and help them celebrate the success when they are successful at cybersecurity risk management. So the rewards are things like incentives, recognition, PR, marketing. You might even have a cash incentive if you charge an application fee for your competition. We want to change the culture and the psychology of the adopting of cybersecurity best practices, right? We want to change that idea that IT professionals are not trusted because of that culture gap. We want to decrease that culture gap. And so by all you have to do is make sure that you build that peer network that we've been talking about. And then we want to create that community of cybersecurity mentors for the next year to grow and grow and grow. Because the competition messaging to the participants is that cybersecurity shouldn't just be delegated to the tech guys. And as being in the tech professional industry, I understand that. I mean, I understand people say, oh, well, my IT provider is taking care of that, or that's James's responsibility, or that's Laura's responsibility. That does not build a cyber aware culture. And we all know this. So the message is that they can take control and we can help with this competition. So why should they participate? We give them all sorts of incentives. The recognition, the public relations, all that kind of stuff. But we also address their psychological distortions. So the top 3 winners speak at the Wyoming Cybersecurity Conference. So they could speak at RMISC next year, for instance. We recognize their accomplishments with statewide press releases, social media, that kind of stuff. We give them an article on the CyberWyoming's website and any supporting media websites. We do follow-up articles throughout the year about how they're doing. We make sure their local chamber of commerce knows about them. And then one of the neat things is they get to use the Made Safe in Wyoming logo, and I'll talk about that in the next slide a little bit further. But the thing is, even though they may not be the winner, all participants get this. They all get listed in the press releases. They may not be able to speak at the conference because we have to limit the time, but they also get their local chamber notified. They go on local media. We do press releases about all of them because what they did is significant in their community. And that's the important thing. And they can use the Made Safe in Wyoming logo. And why is the logo important? The branding is important because it makes it visible to the ultimate customer. So, here we got permission from the Wyoming Business Council to play off of the Made in Wyoming brand. And they said, sure, you can change it to Made Safe in Wyoming as long as you change the look and feel of the brand. So that's what we did. And this branding encourages customers to return to local businesses. So if you see this branding at a local coffee shop, for instance, in Laramie or Cheyenne or Sheridan or anywhere in the state, and there's a box store with a coffee shop down the street, which one would you think you would return to more often? I would return to the local one because I know that they've taken my customer loyalty card and my customer loyalty information and my credit card information more seriously. So that's what we're talking about, is that ultimate consumer, making it visible to that ultimate consumer with this brand. And I think it's very important, I'll talk about this more later, to protect this brand because it has to mean something to the consumers. So how do you actually create this competition? That's the next step of this. What are the steps to creating this competition? So let's go into that. We started out 3 years ago, and we actually had a partner. The Wyoming Business Report was a partner of ours. They've since had severe staffing cuts, so we're on our own this year for the competition. Thank goodness for our members and sponsors. But recruitment of a local media outlet is key to help you promote, advertise, that kind of stuff, because they can do it for free. And if you had to pay for it, you'd have to charge for the competition. But the promotion of the competition is fabulous. We figured out the roles and responsibilities pretty quickly when we had the Wyoming Business Report involved. They did a lot. We would write a lot of news releases. Of course, they would edit them, but they would publish them in their statewide paper, which was fabulous. And then we would also, Made Safe in Wyoming or CyberWyoming would actually manage the full contest. But then we would put the conference on together with that supporting media outlet. So, it's kind of up to you how you want to do it, but that media outlet is a giant partner. We ran the competition and the cybersecurity business counselors, and we managed the entries and the participants. And I'll talk about what that process is, but the interesting thing about it is that right now, the past participants are actually recruiting the judges for this year. And they did that last year as well. So not only has it created mentors in our communities, it's actually created even more involvement because we have a judging committee that is completely separate from the cybersecurity business counselors. I don't actually know who judges any of the reports. It has to be kind of a blind study, but past participants run that committee. And I think that's pretty awesome. The judges are shown at the bottom right circle, and they're recruited from economic development agencies throughout the state. They try to get multiple disciplines. So you might get some people that are from manufacturing and focused on that, and you might get others that are focused on retail. It just depends on on the flavor that the judging committee ends up being, because they're all volunteers. Note that I think that in the upper right, where it says Made Safe in Wyoming bubble, your state chamber or your Denver Chamber of Commerce could be this person, could manage the entrance and the participants, and they could become a cybersecurity business counselor. We actually wrote a grant with the Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce, and they have 2 cybersecurity business counselors in their office today. And they're still doing some on-the-job training, but they could definitely run their own competition if they wanted to in Cheyenne. And they are sending some participants to the state competition this year. So I think that's pretty cool. So if you don't have, a Cyber Colorado or that would like to take on this program, you could definitely partner with your local Chamber of Commerce or the state Chamber of Commerce to do that cybersecurity business counselor role. So the tools that you need to think about before you start the process are you going to have an entry fee? If you are, then you can have cash prizes, for instance. And we chose not to do that. We chose to make our competition free. And our prizes are things like promotional vehicles, videos. Your prize could be a letter from the governor or the letter from the Denver ISSA chapter president, for instance, saying congratulations. Speaking engagements, all that kind of stuff, just lots and lots of recognition. So think about that. And of course, branding is also part of the prize. And then the second thing is this intent to participate form. We've all been there where, we've had a customer commit and then they just kind of fade away and you never hear from them again. And you try to follow up several times and it just doesn't work very well. And you finally just give up after a few months. So this intent to participate form does two things. It makes sure that they have somebody assigned to the project because the competition is a project for them. And then it also, it's their intent, it literally is their commitment vehicle. But it also has a couple of paragraphs at the bottom of the form that basically says that the CyberWyoming staff will not disclose any of their information, because sometimes we talk about vulnerabilities in their network. Sometimes we talk about proprietary information. And we're privy to, how their business runs. And some of that could be considered very sensitive. So we make sure everything's password protected. From the beginning, we explain our security procedures to them, and we let them know that we take their secrets very seriously. The third thing that we have is the cybersecurity checklist. Ours is based on NIST and is homegrown by our IT company members. But we've translated it to be understandable and in business language. So if you read NIST, 505 or 555 Excel spreadsheet row checklist, most business owners that are furniture store owners or retailers or coffee shop owners would not understand that. They might understand a few things in it, but they're not going to understand the whole thing. And so we translated it to friendly language and picked basically the top 30 items, and we go through it with them. You could also, if you decide not to do something like that, you could very easily use the Cyber Readiness Institute's program. It is very business friendly, and it hits five key topics: patching, phishing, USBs, and passwords. And then also it does an incident response checklist. I wouldn't call it a plan, but it's a checklist. And you could use that entire structure for the competition. And the ICT of Myanmar picked that up and decided to do that last year. And they used the Made Safe in Wyoming competition format, but they used the Cyber Readiness Institute's program. And so they just merged the two together and it worked out really well. The next thing that you need to think about is tools for judging. You definitely want the judging reports to be anonymous and standardized. If every report looks completely different, the judges are going to have a very tough time comparing. So that's important. So keep the format very simple, and then create a rubric for judging. That's really important. Our rubric has 6 categories: presentation, thoroughness, technical expertise, planning, progress. Look how far you've come, because some businesses start with nothing. And then innovation of the cyber leader to solve the company's problems. And the last 2, the look how far we've come and the innovation of the cyber leader, are weighted higher than the other 4 categories. So when you look at that, that's our rubric. You can create your own. I'd be happy to share ours with you if you want. And then the final thing is the branding. What do you want your competition logo to look like? How would you protect it from unauthorized use? Because you want to protect it because it needs to mean something to the consumers. So we have ours trade name protected, for instance, and anybody else that uses the Made Safe, let's say there's a Made Safe in Hawaii, they would have to license it from us, but they can make up their own and we wouldn't care. So the next thing is figuring out who does what, your human resources. So, public relations will get the word out and the consistent message. That has been our media outlet partner in the past, but this year we've been doing it, and that has been a little bit harder to do just with our organization, but we've been able to manage it. We send out statewide press releases, and after 3 years, we've been able to have some success with that. The next one is which organization does the cybersecurity business counselors and actually runs the competition? Again, we're doing that this year. The judge recruitment is done by past participants for us right now, but it is very important just to make sure that you have separation of duties. One of the things I wanted to mention on the cybersecurity business counselors is I would highly recommend recruiting women for this. And the reason is because out of all of our businesses that have gone through either the competition or the Made Safe in Wyoming program but didn't do the competition, or done any part of the Made Safe in Wyoming program, almost 2/3 have been women. So women kind of like to talk to women about technology, I've found. And my business partners, who's male, he hasn't had the success with the women that I have. And so I think it's just less intimidating for an HR manager to talk to another woman than it is for an HR manager to talk to a male technical professional. So these cybersecurity business counselors do not need to be technical. In fact, the two that we trained in Cheyenne, one was a marketing major and the other was in charge of event planning. So, and one was a male and one was a female because they took these statistics and decided that that would be a good combination. They'd assign the female to females and the male to males, which I thought was a good idea. So fitting all these pieces together, let's next talk about the timeline and the stages to put the competition together and run it. So phase one. Now this is 3 to 4 months before the competition would start. You want to make sure that you've gained all your partners that you need and all the collaborators that you need. You want to identify their roles and responsibility. Who's going to do PR? Who's going to judge? Who's going to recruit the judges? Who's going to recruit the businesses? Who's going to do the CBC responsibilities? The cybersecurity business counselor. Who's going to run that competition? And you want to also decide on the forms and the tools that you want to use. This is like the intent to participate, the checklist, the reports, and the status meetings. You want to make sure that your process is totally uniform from business to business so that you can't be accused of, favoring one business over another at the end of the day, if it gets there. Your judges reports and your status meetings, your current situation report, and your judges reports all need to have a specific format. And again, I'd be happy to share any of that with anybody that's interested in starting this competition. And then your rubric needs to be decided upon, of course, as well. And then the last part of this 3 to 4 months, you need to make sure you train your cybersecurity business counselors. They need to be trained on privacy, what you expect of them, on the tools that you chose. You may have to, if they're a marketing major, you may need to give them some technical literacy training. What does a router look like? That kind of stuff. They're the things with the pointy antennas. But that kind of stuff, when they walk into a small business, and just give them the confidence to be able to walk into that small business and say, I don't know. Remember, they have that giant team in the background. You're training them on that giant team, from the accountant and the public relations person to the attorney, to the insurance agent, to the IT person. So they have that giant team to help pull from. And it's okay to admit that they don't know something, even though they are the cybersecurity business counselor. But they can go find out. You need to make sure that the branding rules are figured out. For your logo and the prize there, and basically just remember, pick that personable person to be your cybersecurity business counselor to run this. They need to be organized and detail oriented, but they also need to be that person that remembers your name when you walk into the Chamber of Commerce or an agency like that and says, hey, Laura, good to see you again. How's it going with your business? What's going on with the competition this year? That kind of stuff. That's who you want to be your cybersecurity business counselor, because you can train them in technical literacy in the process, but you can't train them to be personable and open, and you can't train them to be to make that relationship already. Okay, so phase 2. Let's talk about that. This is promoting the competition. It starts 1 to 2 months before the competition. So this is where you're enlisting your promoting partners. So you might want to send it out to all the chambers in the area, send out flyers so they can put it in their newsletter, whether it's online, email, social media, whatever. Any economic development agencies in your community, women's business development centers, entrepreneurial centers, nonprofit networks, anything in your community, any organization that you can collaborate with that will put it in their newsletter and help you promote it for free. That's who you need to go after and talk to about, and make sure that you have those set up. And then make sure you have published monthly articles about the competition. It might be that you're publishing somebody that an article about somebody that won last year, and here's how far they've come. For instance, I'm about to publish an article about a company that started out with the competition 3 years ago and now has their ISO 27001, and they just got it. And so that's pretty exciting. They started their process to an actual framework and the certification. You might want to notify the governor's office also that you're doing this, so that they can at least have knowledge about it if they get questions. So things like that. I mean, our governor's office, you can basically walk in and talk to them almost anytime you want, but I know it's a little bit different in Colorado. And then just go and talk wherever you can about the competition. You know, talk to local chambers of commerce, talk to local economic development agencies, do talks like this. I'll share my slides with you if you need it. And then at this year's cybersecurity conference, make sure you state and say, next year we're going to be doing this, right? So build up starting a year away from the winners. So the competition runs itself about 6 to 8 months. So you and the cybersecurity business counselors need to track that intent to participate form. They need to track the initial meetings and this monthly follow-up meetings. And they help that business owner find resources, address barriers. They match them with the services that are needed. So it's very much like a social work type of position. They help facilitate the write-up for the judges. They may actually even write up the rough draft for the judge, get it approved by the business, and then send it off at the end. And I have to say, I have done that before. And we'll actually make, like, as we're going through the monthly status reports, we'll say, oh, this would be a good one for the judges. Let's star this one and put it on our judges list. And it makes people feel really good, like, wow, I'm doing something unique and cool during the process, which is pretty awesome. And then don't forget that you can offer the branding when they've met their goals for their cybersecurity best practices. You can offer the branding with that expiration date because they need to, you know, keep up their maintenance long term. So that a branding should, if they want to renew it next year, they need to prove that they've maintained their cybersecurity efforts. And we have a checklist for that as well. In the judging, they need about 4 to 6 weeks for review of the reports, if there are a lot of them. If there aren't that many, maybe you only have 12 to 15, they might only need 2 weeks because you're trying to keep those reports to 2 to 3 pages. You don't want to overwhelm the judges. They're volunteers after all. And then you want to do a little pre-announcement of notification of the winners, but then the big announcement comes at your cybersecurity conference, right? And they get to speak about the process. And every business owner that's been in the competition has either said it wasn't that hard, or they've said, you know, I thought, you know, I was really intimidated at first, but now I realize there was nothing to be afraid of. So every one of them has expressed interest in mentoring businesses for the next year, getting involved in the process because they can sleep better at night and they see that their peers could do just as well. So this kind of comes back to what if they didn't win? And you know, that can be kind of a downer. I mean, there have been people that I thought would win, but the judges didn't pick them. And I think that's happened every year where I'm like, wow, I think this company should win. And I'm like, oh, I hope they win. I hope they win. I hope they win. And then the judges didn't pick them, which I think is a bummer, but it's always been by the skin of the teeth. You know, the judges are like, wow, this is a really hard decision. And that's exactly what you want it to be. So you want to emphasize that they're all sleeping at night. They all manage their cyber risk. They all can display the branding that you've created, right? And then you want to recognize them on all the websites that collaborate with you. And, you know, I always send a notice to the local chamber. I always do an article about them for their local newspaper. And it may only be 5 or 6 paragraphs, but it's still something that we should celebrate because It's a great example for the rest of their community, and they're still, I mean, I hate to say everybody's a winner, but if everybody's sleeping at night, they really are. And then we'd still recognize them at the cybersecurity conference. We make a giant banner and put all the logos on it of the participants, which I think is pretty cool. So you can see who has actually made an effort at it. And I already just talked about that one, but we still groom them for mentoring others in the next year, because I can tell you that people are competitive enough that if their business didn't win from their community this year, they darn well want to make sure that somebody's going to win from their community next year. And we have to remember that winning provides happiness, but losing provides wisdom. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
And thank you, Laura, for all of that. Now, my question for this is, how many participants do you typically have, and how much time do you spend in a year on this?
That's a good question. So in the first couple of years, it was slower. This year, we're probably going to hit, I don't know, maybe 15. And then I spend about 30 minutes a month per business. And we're advertising right now, so I expect I'm hoping we won't go over 15. But if they're in Cheyenne, I pass them over to the Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce. So that's really helped a lot this year, because they have those 2 trained people. If you had 50 in your community, 50 competitors, or maybe you wanted to say, look, we can't handle more than 25. Just put a limit on the number of people that can enter, and it'll just make it even more exclusive. We haven't put a limit on it yet, but I think if we hit 25 and it was just me and my business partner, we would be pretty busy. The biggest part of the time is the initial meeting with them. I mean, that could take 2, 3, 4 hours sometimes. And so if you can get through that and get that knocked out early in the competition and schedule it to your schedule, then after that, it goes pretty smoothly. And you're looking at just like a half an hour a month per customer.
Per customer. So with 15, you would have roughly 8 hours a month.
Yeah.
But you would need a team of people who are.
Yeah. So if you had 50 people, you would probably need, 2 or 3 trained people to handle that during the competition season. And then an off season for the competition, they would be working on, refining your process and refining your tools and gaining other partners that you might want. That kind of stuff. And we do train on this process. If anybody is interested in it, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay. And the other question I had, because I work for a MSSP, so when these small business people have gone through the program, they're basically building a program that, they can address their risk, but then do they have the resources to actually monitor their environment, to keep things updated, etc. So who do they turn to provide those services?
That's another good question. So we don't just leave them after the competition. We put them on a reminder list on a quarterly basis and say, hey, don't forget, you said that you wanted to test your backups quarterly. So we're going to have you do that, for instance. And so we're reminding you of that. So we have this generic quarterly reminder list that has everybody's needs on it, and they get to kind of pick and choose what worked for them. And then we have an annual reminder list that says, don't forget to review your policies. And when they start, and a big part of this is writing your policies, right? So when they don't forget to review their policies, when they review their policies, it automatically reminds them, oh, you know what? I said I wanted to change my wireless router or my guest network's password at least annually, or maybe every 6 months or something like that. And I didn't do that. So now I'm going to do that. So it does help them with that maintenance. And we have a checklist for them that we send out with that annual and those quarterly reminders so that they can keep it up. And then they're also put on a threat alert list that, if MS-ISAC, for instance, sends out a patch now alert, they get it from us saying, MS-ISAC sent out an Adobe and a Microsoft patch this week. Make sure that your software updated. So that kind of stuff is there are little reminders. And I still get questions from people that were, I talked to 2 years ago, that he's like, well, how do I make sure that my Windows 10 operating system, that the patch actually worked? And so we made little videos, and we'll just send them the link to the video and say, here's how you can tell.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't see any more questions, but would it be okay for folks to reach out to you on social media if they have further questions?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would, the more communities we can get to adopt a competition like this, the more secure our nation is going to be. And so I would be happy to answer any questions. Social media, you can email me at that email address, anything. And if you need some sample forms or anything like that to create your own, let me know, and I'd be happy to share some information.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you spending the time sharing this with us. It sounds like an incredibly valuable program, and I'm sure we'll have more discussions in the future. So thanks for participating, and thank you to everyone for spending time with us, and hope to see you at our next event. So have a good day.
Thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.